My name is Karen, and I am a 38-year-old office worker. I have been married to Paul for 3 years, who I met through a family friend. My family is somewhat wealthy, and since my sister Janet and I are the only children, our relatives were concerned about who would inherit our family's assets. This is why they introduced me to Paul. Paul moved in with us at my family home shortly after we met. My mom had passed away a few years before, so it was just my dad, my husband, and me living together. Paul was very nice and took good care of my father. However, the family friend who introduced us warned me just before our wedding that Paul was very interested in money. This worried me, but Paul didn't show any signs of greed, so we got married. Even so, I kept an eye on him because of what the family friend said. Paul didn't seem greedy, but he was curious about my father's wealth. He often asked about it casually when he and my father were drinking together. But since my father spoke openly about it, I wasn't too concerned. Paul also took an interest in my sister Janet, who is 6 years younger than me and very lively and outgoing. Unlike my calm major, Janet has flashy relationships with men and looks quite different from me, which surprised Paul when he first saw her. Watching Paul be fascinated by Janet, who was so different from me, made me feel uneasy. One day, when Paul found out I couldn't inherit my father's estate, he yelled at me, "You can't inherit the property. I have no use for you anymore. We're getting divorced right now." Later, after he remarried, I got my revenge on him and my sister. At first, I believed that having a beautiful sister meant there was nothing to worry about, but I eventually realized the reasons behind our relatives' concerns. My father doted on my sister, providing her with every opportunity, including the chance to attend both college and community college. After graduating, however, my sister lacked a clear purpose for her education. She seemed mainly interested in avoiding work. Our mother tried to encourage her to get a job immediately after her first college graduation, but my father supported her decision to continue her education at community college. After completing her studies there, she secured a position at a company owned by one of my father's acquaintances. This job, however, lasted only 6 months. She resigned with the unexpected excuse that she couldn't showcase her talents at that workplace. Both my mother and I were taken aback. My sister spoke as if she fully understood the job despite her minimal experience. My father, her supporter, quickly found her another job. It wasn't long after she started this new role that my mother fell ill and was hospitalized. During this time, my sister visited her daily, frequently taking time off from her new job. She eventually resigned from this position too, claiming she needed to care for her mother. But her idea of care involved mostly chatting with our mother or being engrossed in her mobile phone in the waiting room. I found myself handling practical tasks such as changing my mother's hospital laundry while my sister offered little real assistance. It may have been comforting for my mother to have company, but her condition deteriorated. About a month after she was hospitalized, she soon reached a point where she could no longer speak. Within 3 weeks of her condition worsening, my mother passed away. The suddenness of her passing left both my father and sister too shaken to even prepare for the funeral. This left a significant burden on me during an already difficult time. After my mother passed away, I found myself handling all the arrangements. Fortunately, our relatives helped, and we were able to bid farewell to her peacefully. In the wake of this, my sister took on a part-time job and moved into her own place. However, her earnings from the job weren't sufficient to cover her rent and other living expenses. Consequently, our father stepped in, covering her rent and utility bills, while the money she made was mostly spent on her leisure activities. Whenever her part-time income proved inadequate, she would turn to our father for additional financial support. Under our mother's watch, such requests were kept in check, as she was strict about financial discipline with my sister. However, after her death, my father began to indulge these requests, providing whatever money my sister asked for without hesitation. Initially, I saw no issue with this setup, assuming both my father and sister were content. Even after marrying and living with my husband in my parents' home, this financial arrangement continued unknown to me. At the time, my sister also began asking my husband for money, and he complied, often asking her to keep it a secret to avoid causing me any jealousy. He found it difficult to say no to my attractive sister and willingly contributed to her expenses. My sister essentially lived off the money she received from both my father and my husband, engaging with her part-time job only sporadically and according to her whims. This unsustainable lifestyle came to an abrupt end when our father became ill and required hospitalization. I stepped in to care for him, balancing hospital visits with my work responsibilities. Despite the severity of our father's condition, my sister never appeared at the hospital. Instead, she began calling me aggressively, demanding money. She argued that since she had been receiving a regular allowance from our father, I should continue providing for her as before. Stating that her rent and utilities were still being deducted from our father's account, her tone was confrontational, and I was stunned by these revelations. I became infuriated by her selfish attitude, so on maintaining her own lifestyle while completely disregarding our father's well-being in the hospital. The situation exposed a painful truth about my sister's priorities and strained our relationship even further. I was tempted to hang up on her, but she sounded like she was in trouble, so I asked her how much money Dad has been giving her every month and suggested she get a full-time job and support herself with what you earn. My sister responded irritably, "Stop nagging." I was getting $1,000 a month, and remember, rent is separate. I was shocked by her response. She seemed proud of the amount, and it made me think that if I continued to give her this much money each month, she would never be motivated to work seriously. At first, I didn't see a problem with giving her money, thinking my father would soon recover from his hospitalization. But then his condition took a turn for the worse, and I quickly reached out to our relatives. The doctor confirmed it was serious, which shocked me. During this stressful time, I needed my husband's support, but he rarely visited the hospital, claiming he was busy with work. When he did visit, he asked inappropriate questions like, "Frank's estate must be huge, right? Since you and your sister are the only heirs. Are you going to split it in half?" I was speechless. My husband seemed only interested in the inheritance, and I felt a mix of realization and disgust, understanding what the relatives meant when they said he was obsessed with money. When I called my sister to inform her of our father's critical condition, her only concern was about her finances. "Make sure you pay me every month. I can't live without that money," she demanded. The call ended suddenly, leaving me furious at her words, but I was also worried because I thought I heard a faint male voice in the background. About a month later, my father passed away. Sadly, neither my sister nor my husband was with him in his last moments. From my experience with my mother's funeral, I knew how tough it was to organize one. Neither my husband nor my sister offered any help, and my sister didn't even come to the funeral. My husband did show up, but left quickly, claiming he had work. A relative who had introduced us asked me, "Where's Paul?" It's odd for the husband not to be here, isn't it? I just gave a forced smile and said he was busy with work and had gone home. The relative seemed disappointed, and I felt like sighing too. After my father's funeral, when I finally had a moment to myself, my husband asked me with a sly smile, "So how much did you inherit?" Even if you split it, you must have gotten a lot, right? Just like the relatives had warned before our marriage, He was only interested in my father's inheritance. I told him, looking straight at him, my sister got $100 million, and I got nothing. I hadn't even spoken to the lawyer yet and was still dealing with the funeral. Seeing my husband so excited about the inheritance almost made me laugh rather than angry. Believing what I said, he immediately shouted, "What? You can't inherit any property. I don't need you anymore. Let's get divorced now." I felt the same way, so I snapped back, "Let's do it. You married me for my father's inheritance anyway." I handed him the divorce papers I had prepared. He seemed surprised, as if he hadn't expected this, but he signed them anyway. As he left the house after signing the divorce papers, he said bitterly, "I'll divorce you, who gets 0, and remarry your sister Janet, who gets the $100 million. And then he left. I didn't care what he said and went ahead with the divorce, happy to be rid of my awful husband. It seemed like he started trying to marry my sister the very next day. A few days later, he called me demandingly. "Do you still believe that story? When will you sort out the inheritance? Hurry up and give Janet the $100 million. He shouted this over the phone. I had been waiting for him to contact me because I didn't want to reach out first after he left. I answered him calmly, "Let's discuss this at my place next Sunday. I'm preparing for the procedure and will be waiting," thinking he was about to receive the inheritance. My ex-husband happily ended the call. However, I was actually looking forward to seeing his reaction when he discovered the truth. On the weekend, my ex-husband and my sister came to my family home and were surprised to see a lawyer there. My ex tried to act normal, thinking, "Of course you need a lawyer when inheriting a lot of money." Then the lawyer looked puzzled at my ex-husband and began, "Compensation claim before we talk about any inheritance." The lawyer then showed my ex-husband several photos of him leaving my sister's house, clearly dated before our divorce was finalized. "These are evidence of infidelity," the lawyer told him. "So you owe compensation." I had overheard him discussing the inheritance with my sister and had asked the lawyer to look into his infidelity. They might have thought I was too distracted by my father's funeral, but my ex-husband and sister were meeting at her place almost daily, giving me plenty of evidence. The topic quickly shifted from inheritance to compensation, leaving my ex-husband and sister shocked. However, my ex-husband recovered quickly and scoffed. "Compensation is nothing compared to the $100 million from the inheritance. I'll pay for it right away." He then signed the compensation documents provided by the lawyer, trying to appear unconcerned and confident. I confirmed everything and told him, "Enjoy your life with my sister who inherited nothing since you signed. I'll make sure you pay the compensation." When they heard there was no inheritance, my sister screamed in shock and her husband turned bright red, angrily saying, "There's no way the inheritance is 0. I won't let you take it all for yourself." The lawyer then calmly began to explain to the furious couple, "Janet is technically the stepdaughter of your late mother and was not legally adopted by your late father. Therefore, there is no legal parent-child relationship, and Janet cannot inherit anything from your father's estate." I'd also explained to my confused sister about our family history. When our parents remarried, Janet, you were about a year old, so you probably don't remember. But I do. I was 8 years old when our parents were married, and I was happy to suddenly have a sister. I never imagined that my sister would end up taking my husband. Our parents had children from previous relationships, and someone thought it best for them to remarry. My mother treated me as if I were her own daughter, and my father was very fond of my sister. Maybe because she wasn't his biological daughter, he spoiled her a bit extra, wanting to make sure she felt loved. Although both our parents had children from previous marriages, my mother, who was suspected by some relatives of targeting our wealthy family's assets, refused to legally adopt my sister. The relatives only suggested marriage proposals for me because they knew I was the only one who could legally inherit my father's property. If our parents had had a child together, it might have made things even more complicated. But fortunately or unfortunately, they never did. Now I understand why my father continued to support my sister financially even after she grew up. He couldn't leave her any inheritance. I never legally adopted my mother, so legally we weren't parent and child. But that never mattered in how we lived every day. It turns out that my parents had never explained to my sister that they were both previously married before they got together. She only learned this truth today when my ex-husband realized the situation. His face quickly changed from bright red to pale blue. He had not only failed to secure any inheritance from my sister, but had also signed a document obligating him to pay compensation. Looking visibly shocked, my ex-husband asked me, "Was what you said about my sister getting $100 million and me getting nothing a lie?" I struggled to hold back my laughter and replied, "Of course it was a lie. I said it to get back at you for cheating on me. Plus, there's no such thing as a bankrupt estate worth $100 million. Even my wealthy father didn't have that kind of money." Suddenly, my sister, who had been quiet until then, screamed out, "I've been relying on Dad's inheritance and have been spending a lot. What about the money Dad used to give me? Will Karen cover it now?" I responded to my sister, who seemed panicked. "You have a dependable husband now, so you shouldn't need that money anymore, should you? Let Paul take care of you." She turned to look at her pale-faced husband, who shook his head and said, "I've also done a lot of shopping expecting to receive the inheritance, so I can't afford it. Plus, I have the compensation to pay. So I'm financially stretched." At that point, my ex-husband began to apologize profusely to me. "Karen, I'm really sorry. It was all my fault. Will you forgive me and consider starting over?" Watching this scene, the lawyer had to stifle his laughter as he prepared to leave. The confidence and arrogance my ex-husband had shown upon arriving had completely evaporated, and his deep apologies now seemed utterly absurd. After we finished our discussion, my ex-husband and my sister left the house looking defeated. Not long after, they divorced. My ex-husband, who had remarried with the intention of gaining an inheritance, suddenly found himself without interest in my sister once the prospect of money was gone. He even muttered to himself that with the compensation payments he owed me, he couldn't possibly support my sister with no assets to his name. It was decided that he would pay the compensation in installments from his monthly paycheck. The lawyer recommended this method as the most practical solution under the circumstances. After my father's passing, the consequences of his indulgent support became painfully apparent. My sister, who had grown accustomed to financial support from our father, found herself in an unenviable position. She was compelled to work part-time jobs which barely paid enough to cover her daily expenses, let alone the mounting debts that loomed over her. Despite her efforts, the financial burden proved too heavy. Eventually overwhelmed by the accumulating debt, she had no choice but to file for personal bankruptcy. In a desperate move to escape her financial woes, she gave up her condominium, disappearing without leaving a trace. As of now, her whereabouts remain unknown, leaving a void in the family that once depended on each other so deeply. The situation underscored a harsh reality. Our father's well-intentioned but ultimately misguided financial support had shielded my sister from the necessity of developing a work ethic and financial independence. This protection, while provided out of love, had left her ill-prepared for the harsh realities of adult life. As for myself, the aftermath of these family troubles and the dissolution of my marriage left me residing alone in the family home. A house that now felt too large and empty, echoing with memories of a happier, more intact family. The solitude, however, provided me with ample time for reflection. It became a period of self-discovery and reassessment of what I truly wanted out of life. During this introspective period, some well-meaning relatives suggested that perhaps the time had come for me to consider entering into a new relationship. They talked about introducing me to potential suitors, hoping that a new partnership might bring me happiness and stability. However, the bitter experience with my ex-husband, who had shown his true colors as someone more interested in financial gain than in genuine companionship, made me wary of repeating past mistakes. His betrayal had been a painful lesson in discernment, teaching me the importance of knowing someone's character and intentions thoroughly before making such a profound commitment. Determined to take control of my own destiny, I decided to decline the offers for my relatives to arrange introductions. The thought of being matched with another partner who might view me as merely a means to an end was intolerable. Instead, I resolved to find a partner on my own terms. Guided by the lessons learned from my past experiences, this decision was empowering, marking a new chapter in my life where I could prioritize my own values and desires in a relationship. In embracing this newfound independence, I began to explore various avenues for meeting potential partners, whether through social events, community activities, or even online dating platforms. I was committed to finding someone who shared my values, someone who sought a partner for the right reasons, valuing respect, honesty, and genuine affection above financial considerations. This journey was not just about finding a new partner. It was about reclaiming my autonomy and learning to trust again after betrayal. Each step forward was a reaffirmation of my ability to shape my future, a future where my choices would lead to genuine connection and real love, rather than transactional relationships defined by financial dependency. Thus, as I move forward, the lessons of the past remain with me, a guide to avoiding the pitfalls that had once ensnared my family and me, and a beacon towards a more hopeful and self-determined future.
Hey, take care of this, will you? Daniel, my husband of 8 years, barely looked at me as he flung his leather bag across the room, its contents scattering like fallen leaves in autumn. The bag landed with a thud, papers spilling out onto the hardwood floor. I sighed, a familiar sense of resignation washing over me. Lately, this was how our conversations usually began, or rather his orders. I bent down, gathering the strewn papers, when a particular document caught my eye. It was stark, official-looking, and utterly unexpected, a divorce paper. My heart sank, then, oddly, a wave of relief followed. The kind of relief you feel when a long-dreaded inevitability finally stares you in the face. Daniel's part was already filled in. He had made his decision, without so much as a conversation. The realization stung, but it was also liberating in a strange way. Without a second thought, I found myself reaching for a pen. My hand trembled slightly as I filled in my details. Sarah Thompson, I wrote, my name etching the end of an era. I paused, looking at the man I once thought I knew. Daniel was lounging on the sofa, mindlessly flipping through TV channels. The man who had once been my partner, my confidant, had become a stranger. Sarah, what's for dinner? His voice, devoid of warmth, pulled me back to the present. I turned to him, the divorce papers still in my hand. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. Daniel finally looked at me, his eyes narrowing. What about? This. I held up the paper. His expression changed from indifference to surprise, and then to something I couldn't quite decipher. You found that, huh? He finally said, a smirk playing on his lips. Yes, I did, and I've made my decision, I replied, my own voice laced with a firm resolve I didn't know I had. The room filled with a heavy silence, one that spoke volumes more than our brief exchange of words. It was the silence of a chapter closing, of a new beginning taking shape amidst the ruins of the old. As I stood there, holding the symbol of our failed marriage, I realized this was just the beginning. The journey ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in years, I felt a sense of control over my own destiny. The silence lingered in the air long after Daniel had retreated to our bedroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The stillness of the room was a stark contrast to the turmoil inside me. I sat down on the couch, the divorce papers still clutched in my hand, and my mind began to drift back to the beginning, to the days when everything seemed so promising. We had met at a networking event for professionals. Daniel, with his charismatic smile and confident demeanor, had seemed like a breath of fresh air. "Sarah Thompson, right? I've heard a lot about your marketing skills," he had said, extending a hand that I shook, unaware of how significantly this moment would alter my life. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, and soon we were meeting for coffee, then dinner, and before I knew it, we were inseparable. Daniel was attentive, kind, always knowing what to say to make me laugh. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have found someone who understood me so well. As I sat on the couch, lost in the memories of our early days, a stark realization hit me. Those days were long gone, replaced by a cold indifference that had crept into our marriage so subtly that I hadn't noticed until it was too late. I thought back to the little things that started to change after our wedding. The way Daniel's sweet messages became less frequent, how our conversations turned from deep and engaging to functional and brief. It was a gradual shift, one that didn't alarm me at first. I had convinced myself that this was just what happened in marriages over time. Comfort, I told myself, often replaced passion. But comfort didn't mean disrespect. It didn't mean coming home to a husband who barely acknowledged your existence unless he needed something. The man I had fallen in love with, who had promised to be my partner in life, had slowly morphed into someone I no longer recognized. The sound of a car outside snapped me back to reality. I glanced at the clock. It was late. I had been sitting there, lost in thought, for hours. The house was quiet, Daniel likely asleep, uncaring of the storm he had unwittingly unleashed in me. I stood up, my resolve strengthening. The Sarah who walked into this room a few hours ago was not the same Sarah now. The discovery of the divorce papers had opened my eyes to a truth I had been avoiding. Our marriage was over, and it was time for me to reclaim my life. I placed the divorce papers on the table, a symbolic gesture of my readiness to face whatever came next. Tomorrow, I would start the process of untangling my life from Daniel's. It would be challenging, but I knew I had to do it, not just for my own sake, but for the woman I once was and the woman I needed to become again. As I headed to bed, a sense of determination filled me. The road ahead would be filled with obstacles, but I was ready to face them head-on. This was not just the end of my marriage, but the beginning of a new chapter in my life. The morning light spilled into the bedroom, casting a warm glow on the walls. It was a new day, but the weight of my decision still rested heavily on my shoulders. As I made my way to the kitchen, the house felt unusually quiet, almost as if it were holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. Daniel was already up, sitting at the dining table, his eyes fixated on the morning paper. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, a stark reminder of the distance that had grown between us. I busied myself with making coffee, the familiar routine providing a semblance of normalcy in the chaos of my emotions. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen, a comforting presence in an otherwise tense atmosphere. "Sarah," Daniel's voice broke the silence, his tone surprisingly soft. I turned to face him, my heart pounding. "Yes?" "We need to talk about this," he said, gesturing towards the divorce papers that lay between us. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Yes, we do." The conversation that followed was a far cry from the heated arguments we had become accustomed to. Instead, it was a candid, albeit painful, acknowledgement of where we had ended up. Daniel spoke of his frustrations, his sense of being trapped in a life he hadn't envisioned. I listened, not with the intent to argue, but to understand. As he spoke, I couldn't help but wonder how we had missed the signs. The late nights at the office, the weekends spent apart, the growing silences at dinner, they were all telltale signs of a marriage unraveling at the seams. "I just feel like we're living separate lives under the same roof," Daniel finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I feel the same," I replied, the truth of my words hitting me with full force. We were two strangers sharing a life that no longer existed. The conversation shifted to practicalities: the house, our finances, the inevitable legal proceedings. It was a surreal experience, discussing the end of our marriage with a calmness that belied the turmoil within. As the morning turned into afternoon, we reached a mutual understanding. The divorce was inevitable, but we would handle it amicably, respecting the love that once was. After Daniel left the house, presumably to meet with a lawyer, I found myself alone with my thoughts. The finality of our conversation had left me drained, yet there was an underlying sense of relief. The veil of pretense had been lifted, and in its place was a clarity that had been missing for years. I wandered into the living room, my eyes falling on the paintings that adorned the walls. They were remnants of a passion I had long forgotten: my love for digital art. In the early years of our marriage, I would spend hours creating vibrant landscapes and abstract designs, losing myself in the colors and shapes. But as my marriage began to crumble, so did my desire to create. Standing there, surrounded by my own art, a spark ignited within me. It was a reminder of who I was before: a woman with dreams, passions, and a zest for life. A woman who deserved more than the shadows of a loveless marriage. In that moment, I made a decision. I would not only reclaim my life, but also my passion. I would start painting again, not just to fill the void left by my broken marriage, but to rediscover the part of me that I had lost along the way. With renewed purpose, I turned on my computer and opened my digital art software, a familiar welcome screen greeting me. It felt like coming home. As I began to sketch, the lines and colors flowing effortlessly from my fingertips, a sense of peace enveloped me. It was the peace of a woman who had faced her fears, who had taken the first step towards a new beginning. Days turned into weeks as I navigated the murky waters of divorce proceedings. Despite the amicability we had agreed upon, each meeting with Daniel felt like retracing steps in a dance we no longer understood. However, amidst this turmoil, I found solace in my rediscovered passion for digital art. The more I immersed myself in my creations, the more I felt the pieces of my old self falling back into place. One evening, as I sat in front of my computer, lost in a complex design, a series of pings from my phone broke my concentration. It was Ethan, our son. "Mom, can we have dinner this weekend?" "I have some news," his message read. Ethan had been our one constant source of joy. His light-hearted nature and youthful optimism had often been the glue that held us together in our darker days. I replied immediately, agreeing to the dinner. Saturday arrived, and I found myself sitting across from Ethan at our favorite Italian restaurant. He had the same sparkling eyes and easy smile that had always reminded me of Daniel in our happier times. "So, what's this news you have?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Ethan's smile widened. "I'm getting engaged," he announced, his excitement contagious. I felt a burst of happiness for him, mixed with a tinge of sadness for the family life we could no longer give him. "That's wonderful, Ethan. Tell me about her." As Ethan shared stories about his fiancée, his plans for the future, I couldn't help but reflect on the cycle of life. Here was my son, on the cusp of building his own life, his own family, while mine was unraveling. The dinner continued with light-hearted chatter, but my mind kept drifting back to Daniel. I wondered if he knew about Ethan's engagement, if it mattered to him at all. Driving home later that evening, a sense of loneliness enveloped me. The house that once echoed with the laughter and arguments of a family now stood silent, a monument to a life that once was. In the days that followed, as I worked on my art, I found myself reflecting on the bonds that had once tied us as a family. Ethan had always been our anchor, but even he couldn't prevent the drifting apart of two people who had lost their way. My thoughts were often interrupted by memories of Daniel's recent interactions with Julia, his coworker. I remembered the late-night calls, the weekend meetings that he insisted were for work. I had trusted him, never questioning his loyalty. But now doubt crept in, its insidious tendrils wrapping around my heart. Was there more to Daniel's relationship with Julia than just work? The thought nagged at me, an itch that I couldn't quite reach. I remembered the casual touches, the shared laughs, the way they seemed to exist in a world of their own during company functions. I shook my head, trying to rid myself of these thoughts. It didn't matter now. Daniel and I were on separate paths, Our journey together, nothing but a memory. As I continued to delve into my art, I realized it was more than just a hobby. It was my lifeline, pulling me away from the edge of despair. With each stroke of my digital brush, I felt a sense of purpose, a reminder that there was life beyond the ruins of a failed marriage. The weeks leading up to Ethan's engagement party were a blur of activity and mixed emotions. While I busied myself with preparations, a part of me dreaded the event. It would be the first family gathering since Daniel and I had decided to divorce, and the thought of facing him in a room full of people filled me with unease. The day of the party arrived, and the atmosphere was festive, filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Ethan and his fiancée, a charming young woman named Anna, were the picture of happiness. Watching them, a sense of melancholy washed over me. They were beginning their journey together, full of hopes and dreams, while mine with Daniel was coming to an end. As guests mingled, I caught sight of Daniel across the room. Our eyes met briefly, 1,000 words passing between us in that silent exchange. He looked older, more tired, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of the old affection. But it was quickly replaced by the stark reality of our situation. The evening progressed, and I found myself in conversation with some of Ethan's friends. Their youthful enthusiasm was infectious, and for a while I forgot the complexities of my own life. It was then that I noticed Daniel talking to Julia in a corner of the room. They were laughing, their heads close together in a way that was intimately familiar. The sight struck a nerve, and a surge of emotions welled up inside me. The doubts that had been simmering in my mind came to the forefront. The more I observed them, the clearer it became. There was something between them, something more than just professional camaraderie. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, the realization of Daniel's betrayal hitting me like a wave. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself standing outside, taking in the cool night air. The sounds of the party faded into the background, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Ethan joined me, his expression softening as he saw my troubled face. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked, concern etched in his voice. I forced a smile. "Yes, I'm fine, just a little tired, that's all." Ethan looked at me, his eyes searching for the truth. "Mom, you know you can talk to me about anything, right?" I nodded, grateful for his support. "I know, honey, and I will. Just not tonight." He hugged me, a gesture of comfort that brought tears to my eyes. As he went back inside, I stood there, feeling the weight of the evening. The drive home was a reflection of my thoughts, long and winding. The sight of Daniel and Julia together had confirmed my suspicions, and with that confirmation came a sense of closure. I realized that it was time to let go, not just of Daniel, but of the life we had built together. As I lay in bed that night, the events of the evening replayed in my mind. The laughter, the music, and most of all, Daniel and Julia. It was the end of a chapter, but as with all endings, there was also the promise of a new beginning. In the weeks following Ethan's engagement party, I found myself in a state of introspection. The revelation of Daniel's relationship with Julia, though painful, had given me a sense of closure. It was as if a final piece of the puzzle had fallen into place, allowing me to see the complete picture of our failed marriage. With this newfound clarity, I threw myself into my art with a vigor I hadn't felt in years. My digital canvases became a kaleidoscope of emotions, each piece reflecting a different facet of my journey: pain, hope, resilience. It was therapeutic, a way to channel my feelings into something tangible and beautiful. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings were moving along, albeit slowly. Daniel and I had settled into a routine of distant yet cordial interactions, a far cry from the turbulent exchanges of our earlier meetings. It was a strange kind of dance, two people moving around each other, careful not to step on old wounds. One afternoon, as I sat working on a particularly intricate design, my phone rang. It was the lawyer, informing me that the divorce was finalized. The words hit me with an unexpected force. Even though I had been preparing for this moment, the finality of it left me feeling oddly hollow. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The young, hopeful woman who had married Daniel, full of dreams and aspirations, was now a more mature, seasoned version of herself. I had lost some of my naivety, but in its place I had gained strength and a deeper understanding of myself. One evening, as I sat gazing at the latest piece I had created, a vibrant depiction of a phoenix rising from the ashes, Ethan called. "Mom, I wanted to talk to you about something," he said, his voice serious. We met at a small cafe the next day. Ethan's expression was a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Anna and I were talking, and we'd like you to move in with us after we get married," he blurted out. The offer took me by surprise. "Ethan, I can't intrude on your new life like that," I protested, touched by his concern but wary of imposing. "It's not an intrusion, Mom. We want you there. Anna loves the idea, and I don't want you to be alone." His words warmed my heart. Here was my son, embarking on a new chapter in his life, yet still looking out for me. It was a testament to the bond we shared, one that had only grown stronger through the trials of the past year. After much discussion, I agreed. It was a new beginning, not just for Ethan and Anna, but for me as well. A chance to be part of their life, to share in their joys and challenges, while also giving myself the space to continue my own journey. As I packed up my belongings over the next few weeks, I felt a sense of bittersweet nostalgia. Each item, each piece of art, was a reminder of a life lived, of lessons learned, and of the resilience that had carried me through. Moving day arrived, and as I stepped into Ethan and Anna's home, I felt a sense of belonging. It was a new environment, but one that was filled with love and warmth. Ethan and Anna had gone out of their way to make me feel welcome, setting up a small studio for me to continue my art. In the days that followed, I found a new rhythm to my life. I spent my mornings working on my art, exploring new techniques and styles. In the evenings, I would join Ethan and Anna for dinner, sharing stories and laughter. It was during one of these dinners that Ethan turned to me, a serious look in his eyes. "Mom, how are you really doing? After everything with Dad, I mean." I took a moment to reflect, then smiled. "I'm doing okay, Ethan. Better than okay, actually. I've found a new purpose in my art, and being here with you and Anna has given me a sense of family that I thought I had lost." Ethan smiled, relief evident in his eyes. "I'm glad, Mom. You deserve to be happy." As we continued our dinner, chatting about everything and nothing, I realized that this was what healing looked like. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic change, but a gradual rebuilding of oneself, piece by piece. And as I looked around the table, at the faces of my son and his fiancée, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be. In this new beginning, I had found not just a place to live, but a home. Living with Ethan and Anna brought a sense of harmony and companionship that I hadn't realized I was missing. Their youthful energy and love for each other were infectious, and I found myself looking forward to the simple pleasures of our daily life together. One afternoon, as I was setting up my art supplies in the small studio Ethan had arranged for me, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. Hesitantly, I opened it, and to my surprise, it was from Julia, Daniel's coworker. "Sarah, can we meet? There's something I need to tell you about Daniel," the message read. My heart skipped a beat. What could Julia possibly have to say about Daniel now after all this time? Curiosity piqued. I agreed to meet her at a nearby cafe the next day. Sitting across from Julia, I noticed the nervousness in her eyes. She fidgeted with her coffee cup before speaking. "Sarah, I owe you an apology," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Daniel and we had an affair. It started before your divorce. I didn't realize the extent of the damage we were causing." Her confession, though not entirely unexpected, still stung. I had suspected their relationship, but hearing it confirmed brought back a flood of emotions. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Julia sighed, a look of genuine remorse on her face. "I ended things with Daniel. It was wrong, and I regret it deeply. I just thought you deserved to know the truth." I sat there, processing her words. Part of me wanted to be angry, to lash out at the woman who had been part of my marriage's downfall. But another part, the part that had found peace and moved on, simply felt pity. "Julia, what's done is done," I said finally. "I appreciate you telling me, but I've moved on. I hope you can too." Leaving the cafe, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. Julia's confession had closed the final chapter on a part of my life that was now firmly in the past. Over the next few months, my life settled into a comfortable routine. My art was flourishing, with several pieces being featured in local exhibitions. Ethan and Anna's wedding was fast approaching, and the excitement in the house was palpable. As I watched Ethan and Anna together, so full of love and hope for the future, I couldn't help but reflect on my own journey. The pain of the past had given way to a quiet strength, a resilience I hadn't known I possessed. The wedding day arrived, a beautiful ceremony filled with laughter, tears, and an overwhelming sense of joy. Watching Ethan and Anna exchange their vows, I felt an immense pride for the man my son had become. After the wedding, as guests mingled and danced, I found myself standing alone for a moment, taking it all in. It was then that I saw Daniel, standing a short distance away, watching me. Our eyes met, and for a brief moment, time stood still. There was so much I wanted to say, so many questions I wanted to ask. But as I looked at him, I realized that none of it mattered anymore. Daniel nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement of everything that had passed between us. Then, turning away, he disappeared into the crowd. As I rejoined the celebration, a sense of peace settled over me. My journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but it had led me here, to this moment of contentment and hope. Life, I realized, was a tapestry of experiences, each thread woven with its own story. Some were dark, others bright, but all were essential in creating the larger picture. And as I danced with Ethan, my heart full of love and gratitude, I knew that my tapestry was still being woven, each day adding a new and beautiful thread to the story of my life.
My greedy husband used my $300,000 inheritance to secure his own future, while leaving me stranded. He secretly sold the house where I was caring for my paralyzed father-in-law, laughing as he declared, "You both are now homeless." To add insult to injury, he threw divorce papers in my face, shattering the life I thought we had built together. The very next day, when lawyers approached me with legal documents, I was left in shock, my world crumbling around me. How could everything I trusted slip away so quickly? I'm Sophia, a graphic designer in my late 30s, and I want to share my story with you. Life has taken unexpected turns, some that left me feeling on top of the world, and others that brought me to my knees. After my parents passed away, I inherited a decent amount of money, which made my life in Austin, Texas, quite comfortable. I had my own apartment filled with sunlight and colorful artwork that I loved to create. Financially, I was secure, but emotionally, I was searching for something or someone to fill the void. That's where my best friend, Maya, came into the picture. She's in her 30s and has always been obsessed with astrology. She'd tell me how the stars aligned and how they could predict our futures. I was skeptical, but also a bit curious. One evening over coffee, she leaned in with excitement. "Sophia, I have to tell you about this guy I found in your chart. His name is Ryan, and he's your perfect match." I raised an eyebrow, amused. "Oh, really? Is he a prince or a movie star?" Maya laughed, undeterred by my teasing. "No, he's a regular guy, but the stars say you two are meant to be together. Just trust me. You need to meet him." After some coaxing, I reluctantly agreed to meet Ryan, half expecting a weird guy who would talk about constellations all night. To my surprise, when I met him, he was charming and down-to-earth. He had an easy smile, a great sense of humor, and a love for hiking and indie films, just like me. We started seeing each other regularly, and I felt something spark between us. It was exhilarating, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. After a few months, Ryan and I became a couple. Things moved quickly, and before I knew it, he convinced me to invest my inheritance into his home, persuading me to pay off his $300,000 mortgage. "Think about it, Sophia," he said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "If we're going to build a life together, we need a solid foundation. This house can be ours." I hesitated but ultimately agreed, swept up in the whirlwind of romance. I thought I was making a sound investment in our future. Little did I know, my trust would soon be put to the test. The first few months in the house were blissful. We decorated together, and I loved creating art for the walls. Ryan and I often took weekend trips to the nearby hills, enjoying nature and each other's company. But soon, life threw us a curveball. Ryan's father, Thomas, was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome, a rare condition that left him paralyzed. The news hit us hard, and I felt a wave of sympathy for Ryan and his family. I offer my support without hesitation. Ryan, let's figure this out together, I said one evening as we sat on the couch. Your dad needs help, and we can do this. Thanks, Sophia. It means a lot, he replied, looking grateful but worried. As Thomas needed constant care, I decided to move in with Ryan's family to help out. I thought it was the right thing to do. Ryan's mother, Brenda, was in her 60s and suffered from chronic arthritis. She became increasingly demanding, making it hard for me to focus on my graphic design work while also caring for Thomas. Can you do this? Can you get me that? Brenda would ask, her tone sharp, her frustration palpable. Yes, I'm working on it, I would respond, trying to stay calm. But it was challenging. I felt overwhelmed, trying to juggle my job and Thomas's care. I even took a short course in physical therapy techniques to help him regain some movement. Just a little more, I would say to Thomas during our sessions, trying to encourage him. You can do it. Over time, Thomas started to show signs of improvement. He regained slight movement in his fingers and began to speak a few words. Each small victory felt monumental, but my efforts often went unnoticed by Brenda. One evening, after a long day of caring for Thomas and dealing with Brenda's constant complaints, I finally snapped. Brenda, I'm trying my best here. I'm doing this for your husband and for Ryan. Can't you see that? Brenda just rolled her eyes. You should be more focused on taking care of him instead of sitting around. It's not like you have a real job anymore. I felt my heart sink. I was trying to help a family in need, but all I received were criticisms. Yet, I remained committed to Thomas, who, despite his struggles, was grateful for my support. I could see the warmth in his eyes every time I made progress with him. Months passed, and finally, Brenda announced she needed a break. I'm going to stay with Ryan for a while, she said one morning, packing her bags. I can't take this place anymore. Relief washed over me. That's great, Brenda. I hope it helps you. As she left, I turned to Thomas. It's just us now, buddy. We can make some real progress, I said, smiling at him. He blinked slowly in response, and I knew he understood. It was a fresh start for both of us, but little did I know, shadows loomed ahead. The days turned into weeks, and I became more focused on helping Thomas regain his strength. We worked on exercises every morning, and I learned more about his condition and how to assist him better. However, I started noticing changes in Ryan. He seemed distant and preoccupied. Hey, is everything okay? I asked him one night after dinner. Yeah, just work stuff, he replied, but I could sense something was off. As we tried to navigate our new reality, I had no idea that the biggest challenge was yet to come. The feeling of unease clung to me like a shadow, and soon, everything I thought I knew would be turned upside down. As the weeks passed, I found comfort in my routine with Thomas. We shared quiet moments in the garden, and I could see the determination in his eyes as he worked to regain his strength. It felt good to help him, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was making a real difference in someone's life. But beneath that comfort, a nagging feeling of unease began to grow within me. One evening, while I was busy working on a graphic design project, my phone buzzed. It was Ryan. Can we talk? The message read. My stomach nodded as I sensed something was wrong. Sure, when? I replied. Now, he said. I quickly finished up and made my way to the living room. Ryan was sitting on the couch, looking more serious than I had ever seen him. Sophia, there's something I need to tell you, he said, his voice low. Okay, what's going on? I asked, my heart racing. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. My dad, he's not getting better. The doctors are saying he may not recover fully. I just can't handle this anymore. I understand that it's hard, I said gently, but we're doing our best. You have me here, and we're making progress. Yeah, but I need more. I need to focus on myself for a while, and I can't keep doing this. I think I need to sell the house, he said, avoiding my gaze. Sell the house. But Ryan, we've invested so much in this place. This is our home. I protested. He looked up at me, his eyes cold. It's not just a house anymore. It's a burden. I can't keep pretending everything is fine. Fine, I said, my voice shaking. But what about your dad? He needs you. Ryan stood up, anger flaring in his eyes. Don't you get it? I'm not his caregiver. I can't keep sacrificing my life for him. I felt a wave of frustration and fear wash over me. You can't just abandon him. He's your father. Just think about it, Sophia, he shot back before leaving the room. The conversation left me rattled. I couldn't understand how Ryan could be so dismissive of his own father's needs. My resolve to support Thomas grew stronger, but I also felt increasingly isolated. The next day, I continued to work with Thomas, who had become my confidant. One afternoon, while we were sitting in the sun, he looked at me intently. Sophia, I need to tell you something, he said slowly, his voice gaining strength. I leaned closer, eager to hear what he had to say. What is it, Thomas? I overheard Ryan and Brenda, he whispered. They were talking about how they plan to take advantage of you. They think you're just a means to an end. My heart dropped. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I was in a room when they thought I couldn't hear. They mentioned something about your inheritance and how they could use it to their advantage, he explained, his brow furrowed in concern. I shook my head in disbelief. That doesn't make any sense. Ryan wouldn't do that to me. He might not see it that way, Thomas said, looking me straight in the eye. But you need to be careful. I didn't want to believe it either, but sometimes people show their true colors when faced with tough times. As I absorbed Thomas's words, a knot of dread twisted in my stomach. Could Ryan really be planning something against me? I thought back to his recent behavior, his distance, his unwillingness to talk about his father. It all began to make sense in a way I wished it didn't. I resolved to confront Ryan about what Thomas had told me. That evening, as we sat across from each other at the dining table, I summoned all my courage. Ryan, I need to talk to you about something important, I began. Can it wait? I'm really not in the mood, he replied, looking down at his plate. No, it can't wait. I heard something from your dad, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. His eyes narrowed. What do you mean? Thomas told me he overheard you and Brenda discussing plans to use my inheritance. Is that true? Ryan's expression changed. His face went pale. That's ridiculous. My dad doesn't know what he's talking about. Why would he make that up? You've been acting distant lately. What's really going on? I pressed, refusing to back down. Nothing. I'm just stressed out, he snapped, pushing his chair back. I can't deal with this right now, Sophia. Then what can you deal with, Ryan? Because I feel like I'm in this alone, I said, my voice trembling. He stood up, fists clenched, and walked out of the room. I can't do this, he muttered. I felt my heart sink as I realized the conversation hadn't gone anywhere. Doubt filled my mind, and the seed of betrayal was planted deep within me. As I sat alone at the table, the walls felt like they were closing in. I could sense that my world was about to unravel, and I had no idea how to stop it. Days turned into a blur of worry and tension, but I remained committed to Thomas. I didn't want to believe Ryan could be capable of such betrayal. Yet every time I glanced at my phone, a sense of dread washed over me. The shadows were creeping in, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the brink of something I wasn't prepared for. It was a strange mix of anxiety and determination that filled my days as I continued to help Thomas. I poured my heart into his recovery, hoping to make a difference while grappling with my suspicions about Ryan. Despite my growing unease, I tried to push thoughts of betrayal to the back of my mind, focusing instead on the little victories we were achieving together. One afternoon, as we practiced Thomas's physical therapy exercises, I noticed him struggling to lift his arm. Come on, Thomas, you can do it, I encouraged, gripping his arm gently to guide him. With a determined look, he gave it his all, and his fingers finally curled around a small object I had placed on the table. Good job. That's it. I cheered, feeling a rush of pride. Thomas smiled weakly, his eyes lighting up. Thanks, Sophia. I couldn't have done this without you, he said, his voice steadier than before. Just then, the front door creaked open and Ryan walked in, looking exhausted. What's going on here? He asked, eyeing the scene suspiciously. Just helping your dad with some exercises, I replied, trying to keep my tone light. Yeah, well, don't tire him out too much. He needs rest, Ryan said, a hint of irritation in his voice. I felt a pang of frustration. We're making progress, Ryan. It's important for his recovery. He shrugged, clearly uninterested. Whatever, he muttered, heading into the kitchen. I exchanged a worried glance with Thomas. His expression mirrored my concern. Sophia, I think you need to prepare yourself, he said quietly after Ryan left the room. Prepare for what? I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. I just have a bad feeling about Ryan. If he's truly thinking about selling the house, you need to be ready for what that might mean for you, Thomas said, his tone serious. The weight of his words sank in. I didn't want to think about it, but deep down, I knew he was right. I couldn't shake the feeling that the foundation of my life was beginning to crumble. The last thing I wanted was to lose everything I had worked for, especially my relationship with Thomas, who had become like family to me. Later that week, I returned to our home after running errands, only to find the living room in disarray. Boxes were scattered everywhere, and Ryan was packing up his belongings. What's going on? I asked, my heart racing. I'm just getting things organized, Ryan said curtly, avoiding eye contact. Organized for what? Are you seriously packing? I pressed, feeling a surge of panic. Just a few things for the sale, he said casually. Sale? You can't be serious, Ryan. You're really going through with it? I exclaimed, disbelief flooding my voice. Look, Sophia, this is for the best. I need to take control of my life, he snapped, finally meeting my gaze. This isn't just your life, Ryan. It's ours. You can't sell the house without even discussing it with me. I felt the anger rising within me. I invested my inheritance into this place. Maybe it was a mistake, he retorted, crossing his arms defensively. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're throwing everything away. What about your dad? What about us? Ryan shook his head, frustration evident on his face. You don't get it. I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending everything is fine. It's exhausting. Exhausting? Try being the one caring for your father while you sit here and make plans to abandon him. I shot back, tears welling in my eyes. Stop acting like you're the only one who cares, he yelled, the tension in the room palpable. With that, Ryan stormed out of the house, leaving me standing there in shock. The reality of what was happening hit me like a wave. I felt betrayed and alone, and the man I had trusted was now a stranger. The next morning, I returned to Thomas's room, where he was waiting for me. What happened? He asked, his brow furrowed with concern. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. Ryan wants to sell the house. He doesn't care about what we've built here, or how much it means to me. He's giving up on everything. Thomas looked solemn. You need to think about your future, Sophia. You can't allow him to dictate your life. You deserve better. His words resonated deeply within me. I realized then that I had to reclaim my life. I had to take a stand, not just for myself, but for Thomas, who had become my ally in this battle. With renewed determination, I decided it was time to confront Ryan once and for all. I needed to find out if his intentions were truly as selfish as they seemed. My heart raced at the thought of what lay ahead, but I knew I couldn't back down now. The shadows were closing in, and I was ready to face whatever darkness awaited me. The air in the house felt thick with tension as I prepared to confront Ryan. My heart raced with a mix of anxiety and determination. I knew I had to stand up for myself and for Thomas. As I approached Ryan, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. Ryan, we need to talk, I said, finding him in the living room, surrounded by half-packed boxes. He glanced up, irritation flickering in his eyes. What now? I swallowed hard. I can't let you sell the house without discussing it with me. This is our home, not just an investment. I deserve to know what you're really planning. He crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. I told you this is for my own good. You have no idea how trapped I feel. I can't keep living like this. Trapped? What about your father? He needs you now more than ever, and you're just going to walk away. I challenged, my voice rising. You're abandoning him. Ryan's expression hardened. I can't be responsible for him anymore. I didn't sign up for this. I felt a surge of anger. And I did? I've been here for him, when you couldn't be. You think you can just sell this house and leave without any consequences? Consequences, he scoffed. What do you mean? Ryan, I invested my inheritance into this place. You're not just hurting me, you're hurting your father. If you go through with this, I will fight you for what's right. I declared, feeling the fire within me grow stronger. His face paled at my words. You wouldn't dare, he shot back, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Try me, I said, unwavering. This is not just about money. It's about loyalty, about family. You need to decide what kind of person you want to be. Ryan remained silent, the tension hanging between us like a heavy fog. Finally, he dropped his gaze to the floor, his shoulders slumping. I don't know what to do, he admitted quietly. Then let's figure it out together. We can find a way to support your dad without throwing everything away, I said gently. But you need to meet me halfway. He looked up, his expression softening. I'm scared, Sophia. I don't want to lose everything, but I don't know how to handle this. We'll handle it together. I'm not going anywhere, I reassured him, feeling a flicker of hope. In that moment, I realized that we both needed to grow. It was time for Ryan to face his responsibilities, and it was time for me to reclaim my life, no matter how messy things got. As the days turned into weeks, we worked together to support Thomas's recovery. Ryan began to show signs of commitment, balancing his own fears with the needs of his father. It wasn't easy, but we learned to communicate better and find strength in our shared goal. One evening, as we sat in the living room, I noticed the warmth returning to Ryan's eyes. Thank you for not giving up on me, he said, breaking the silence. I didn't realize how much I needed you until I almost lost you. I smiled, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. We're in this together. Family doesn't just mean blood. It's about being there for each other. The months rolled on, and Thomas continued to improve. He was now able to move around the house with some assistance, and had even started sharing stories from his past, filling our lives with laughter and memories. Our bond deepened, and I felt grateful for the unexpected role I had taken in his life. As for Ryan and me, we began to rebuild our relationship. We found joy in simple moments, whether it was cooking dinner together or watching movies on the couch. The shadows that had once loomed over us began to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of hope. One day, as we sat together in the garden, Ryan turned to me, his expression serious. Sophia, I want to make things official. I don't want to lose you again. Are you proposing? I asked, surprised. He nodded, pulling out a simple ring from his pocket. I know it's been a rocky road, but I believe we can face anything together. Tears filled my eyes as I nodded, accepting the ring. Yes, of course. I want to build a future with you. In that moment, I realized that life's hardships had taught me valuable lessons about trust, resilience, and personal growth. I had reclaimed my life, not just for myself, but for those I loved. As we embraced, I felt stronger than ever, ready to face whatever challenges the future held, hand in hand.
I never thought my life would change because of a text message. But there I was, sitting in my car at a red light, smiling at my phone like an idiot. 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test, the photo I was about to show Travis. After 3 years of trying, we'd finally done it. My name is Sarah, and that moment of pure joy was the last one I'd have for a very long time. I remember everything about those few seconds. The way the afternoon sun hit my dashboard. The faint smell of the air freshener Travis always teased me about. The song playing on the radio, some pop hit about forever love that I used to roll my eyes at but suddenly felt perfect. The light turned green. I pulled forward, already imagining Travis's face when I showed him the picture. He'd been dropping hints about wanting kids since our wedding day. And his mother Irene had been not so subtly asking about grandchildren at every family dinner. I never saw the truck coming. The impact came from my left side, a violent explosion of metal and glass. The world spun and time seemed to stretch like taffy. I remember thinking absurdly that I needed to protect my phone so Travis could see the picture. When everything stopped moving, I couldn't feel my face. Warm liquid dripped down my neck, and somewhere far away, people were screaming. A man's voice kept saying, oh God, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." The words floated around me like leaves in the wind. "Ma'am, can you hear me? Don't move." A paramedic's face appeared in what was left of my driver's side window. "We're going to get you out." I tried to speak to tell them about the baby, but my mouth wouldn't work right. The last thing I remember before passing out was someone holding my hand and promising everything would be okay. They lied. I woke up 3 days later in the hospital. Travis was there, asleep in a chair beside my bed. He looked terrible, unshaven, clothes wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. I tried to reach for him, but my arms felt like they were made of lead. "Travis!" My voice came out as a whisper. He jerked awake, his eyes finding mine. For a split second, something flickered across his face, something that made my stomach twist. But then he smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, beautiful," he said, taking my hand. "You had us worried." I tried to smile back, but my face felt wrong. Stiff. Like it belonged to someone else. "The baby," I managed to say. "Is..." Travis's hand tightened on mine. "I'm so sorry, Sarah." His voice cracked. "The doctors did everything they could." I closed my eyes, feeling the world tilt beneath me. Through the fog of pain medication, I heard the door open and recognized Irene's perfume before she spoke. "Travis, honey, the doctor needs to speak with you." Her voice was soft, careful. "About the reconstruction options." "I'll be right back," Travis said, squeezing my hand before letting go. I kept my eyes closed, pretending to drift off. But I heard them in the hallway, their voices carrying through the partially open door. "She's going to need extensive surgery," Travis was saying. Her face. "Mom, I don't know if I can." "Shoo, darling. We'll figure it out. One step at a time." I lay there, tears sliding silently down my ruined face, as my husband and his mother discussed my future like I was a problem to be solved. In that moment, something inside me shifted. Something hard and cold took root where warmth and hope used to live. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment my old life ended. The moment Sarah Blake, loving wife, hopeful mother-to-be, eternal optimist, began to fade away. And something else, something stronger and darker, began to take her place. Coming home from the hospital felt like walking into someone else's life. Everything looked the same. Our modern suburban house with its perfectly manicured lawn. The welcome mat Travis's mother gave us as a housewarming gift, even the faint smell of Travis's cologne in the entryway. But nothing felt right anymore. "I've set up the guest bedroom downstairs," Travis said, carrying my bag. The doctor said stairs might be difficult for a while. I noticed he wouldn't look directly at me. 3 weeks in the hospital and he still couldn't meet my eyes. "Thanks," I managed, touching the bandages that covered half my face. "I've invited Mom over for dinner," he added quickly. "She wants to help with your recovery plan." Course she did. Irene Blake never missed an opportunity to manage a crisis, especially one that threatened her son's perfect life. The guest room felt sterile, like a hotel suite. Travis had cleared out all my personal items from our bedroom upstairs, arranging them with mechanical precision. My makeup vanity, a cruel joke now, sat in the corner, mirror turned to face the wall. "Do you need anything?" Travis hovered in the doorway, phone in hand. "I have a few work calls to make, but I'm fine." I wasn't, but what was the point in saying otherwise? Irene arrived precisely at 6, armed with casseroles and opinions. I sat at our dining room table, watching her arrange flowers in a vase while Travis poured wine. "The doctors say the scarring might improve with time," Travis was saying, not looking at either of us. "Well, there are always options," Irene replied, her voice dripping with forced optimism. "I know an excellent plastic surgeon in the city." Very discreet. I pushed my untouched food around my plate. The insurance won't cover cosmetic procedures. Oh, darling. Irene reached across the table, patting my hand. We have to think about Travis's position at the firm. Image is everything in corporate marketing. My fork clattered against the plate. My face is an image problem? Mother, Travis warned, but Irene continued. I'm just being practical. Travis has worked so hard to build his career. And now, with the complications from the accident, she delicately dabbed her lips with a napkin. Well, sometimes life forces us to make difficult choices. Complications? The word felt like acid in my mouth. You mean losing the baby? Travis's wine glass froze halfway to his lips. We hadn't discussed the pregnancy since the hospital. I hadn't told him I was planning to surprise him that day. Sarah, he started, but I cut him off. Did you tell her about the baby, Travis? Or just about your wife's ruined face? Irene's perfectly manicured hand flew to her throat. A baby? Oh, Travis. It doesn't matter now, Travis said quickly, standing up. What matters is moving forward. Mother's right, we need to think practically. I looked between them, my husband who couldn't meet my eyes and his mother who couldn't stop staring at my bandages. Perfect son and his perfect mother planning my perfect rehabilitation. I think I need to lie down, I said, pushing away from the table. Of course, dear, Irene called after me. We'll figure everything out. In the guest room, I could hear their muffled voices through the wall. Poor thing, Irene was saying. But Travis, you're still young. There will be other chances for children once everything is settled. Mom, please. I'm just saying you need to think about your future. Both of your futures. I touched the bandages on my face, feeling the rough texture of gauze where smooth skin used to be. In our wedding photos, Travis used to say I looked like an angel. Now he couldn't even look at me. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Mrs. Blake, my name is Graham Foster. I'm the father of the young man who caused your accident. Please, I need to speak with you. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the screen. Through the wall, I could still hear Travis and his mother planning my future without me. Something shifted in my chest, not quite hope, but something closer to purpose. I typed back a single word. When? I found Travis's whiskey bottle hidden behind the cleaning supplies under the kitchen sink. 3 weeks after I'd come home and already half empty. I might not have noticed if I hadn't heard him stumbling around at 3 a.m, talking on his phone in what he thought was a whisper. The bandages had come off yesterday. I avoided mirrors now, but I couldn't avoid overhearing Travis's late-night conversations. You should have seen the client's face today, he slurred to someone. Like that movie, you know? Two-Face from Batman. A pause followed by drunken laughter. I know. I shouldn't joke. But man, you try living with it. I stood in the darkness of our kitchen, holding his hidden bottle and felt something inside me crack. The next morning, Travis acted like nothing had happened, kissing my cheek, the unscarred side, before leaving for work. Big presentation today, he said, adjusting his tie. Don't wait up. I waited until his car pulled away before going upstairs to our bedroom. I hadn't been up here since coming home, respecting Travis's unspoken wish to keep me out of sight in the guest room. Everything was exactly as I'd left it the morning of the accident, except for one thing. My old art supplies were missing from the closet. I found them in the garage, buried under Christmas decorations. The wooden box still had my name carved into it, a wedding gift from my grandmother. Inside, my brushes lay untouched, along with the expensive oils Travis had bought me when I'd mentioned wanting to take up painting again. You should focus on more practical things, Irene had said back then. Travis needs a wife, not an artist. I set up the easel in the guest room, facing the window. The morning light fell across my canvas as I mixed colors, muscle memory taking over. Red for anger, black for grief, yellow for the hope I used to feel. The brush moved almost on its own, creating something both beautiful and terrible. Hours passed. The front door opened and closed. Travis's footsteps paused outside my door. Sera? Mother's here for dinner. I didn't answer, adding another streak of red to the canvas. The door opened. Sarah, what are you? Travis stopped mid-sentence. What is that supposed to be? I stepped back from the painting, a woman's face, split down the middle. One side perfect and pristine, the other distorted and fractured, with a wine glass pressed to smiling lips. It's you, Irene's voice came from behind him. Or rather, what you've become. I call it two-face, I said quietly, watching Travis's face pale. Funny, right? I don't understand, he stammered, but his eyes gave him away. Don't you? I heard you last night, Travis. And the night before. And the night before that. Irene stepped between us. Now, Sarah, Travis has been under tremendous stress. If you just try to understand. Understand what? I turned to face them fully, watching them flinch. That my husband makes jokes about my scars? That he hides bottles around the house? That he can't even sleep in the same room as me anymore? That's not fair, Travis protested. I'm trying. To what? Keep up appearances? I gestured to the painting. Is this appearance better? Perhaps, Irene said stiffly. This emotional outburst is a sign you need professional help. I laughed, and the sound made them both step back. Professional help? Like that plastic surgeon you keep mentioning? The one who can fix Travis's image problem. Sarah, please! Travis reached for me, but I moved away. Don't worry, I said, picking up my brush again. I'm working on fixing everything. They left the room, whispering urgently to each other. I turned back to my canvas, adding the final touch, a text message floating in the background. Tomorrow at 2. I'll explain everything. Graham Foster. I stepped back, studying my work. In the painting, both sides of the face were smiling, but for very different reasons. Tomorrow, I'd meet the father of the man who destroyed my face. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, I had more painting to do. Cafe Graham Foster chose was exactly what I expected. Quiet, expensive, far from anywhere Travis or Irene might go. I wore a scarf wrapped partially around my face, drawing less attention than the medical mask I'd gotten used to wearing in public. Graham stood when I approached his table, and I immediately recognized the guilt in his eyes. I'd seen it in the mirror often enough lately, that look of someone haunted by what they couldn't change. Mrs. Blake, he said softly. Thank you for coming. Sarah, I corrected, sitting down. Your son, is he? In rehab. Graham's hands tightened around his coffee cup. Again. The accident happened after he left his third facility. I should have seen it coming. A waitress approached, hesitated when she saw my scarf, then plastered on a professional smile. I ordered black coffee, waiting until she left before speaking. Why did you want to meet? Graham pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. These are brochures from the top reconstructive surgeons in the country. I've already spoken with Dr. Chen in New York. He's willing to take your case. I stared at the glossy pages, at the before and after photos of smiling patients. Insurance denied. I'm not offering insurance. Graham's voice cracked. I'm offering to pay for everything. It's the least I can do after what my son. Why? The word came out sharper than I intended. Because I failed him, Graham said simply. And in failing him, I failed you too. The money can't fix everything, but it can fix this. He gestured vaguely toward my face. I opened the brochure, studying Dr. Chen's credentials. Cost listed made my stomach clench, more than Travis made in a year. Your husband doesn't know you're here, Graham said. It wasn't a question. No. Good. He leaned forward. Because there's something else you should know. The night of the accident, my son wasn't alone in the car. My coffee arrived. I wrapped my hands around the hot cup, waiting. There was a woman with him. Someone's wife. Graham's voice was heavy with meaning. They'd been meeting at the Golden Leaf Hotel every Thursday for months. The Golden Leaf, where Travis had his weekly client meetings. The woman survived, Graham continued. No injuries. She left the scene before the police arrived. My son was too drunk to remember her name, but he remembered where she worked. He slid another paper across the table. Blake Marketing Associates. Coffee turned to acid in my stomach. You're lying. I wish I was. For both our sakes. Graham pulled out his phone, showing me a security camera image. A woman hurrying through a hotel lobby, followed by a familiar figure in a gray suit. Travis. Why are you showing me this? My voice sounded distant, even to myself. Because you deserve to know the whole truth. And because I'm offering you a choice. Graham tapped the brochures. Dr. Chen can do the surgery next month. He can make you look exactly like you did before. Or he can make you look like someone else entirely. Someone Travis and his friend wouldn't recognize. I thought about Travis's late-night phone calls, his cruel jokes, his inability to look at me. I thought about Irene's constant hints about divorce and fresh starts. Why would I want that? Graham's smile was sad but understanding. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't confrontation. It's making them live with their guilt while you become someone new. Someone stronger. I touched my scarf, feeling the rough texture of the scars beneath. When does Dr. Chen need an answer? Take your time. Graham stood, leaving a business card beside the brochures. But remember, this isn't just about fixing what was broken. It's about choosing who you want to become. I sat there long after he left, staring at the security camera photo, at Travis's familiar profile next to an unfamiliar woman. Finally, I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Graham. I choose someone new. His reply came instantly. Welcome to your second chance, Sarah. I walked home slowly, planning what to pack, what to leave behind, and how to disappear without a trace. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying someone else's life. It's about rebuilding your own. New York felt like another world. Dr. Chen's private clinic occupied the top floor of a sleek Manhattan building, all glass and chrome and discretion. I told Travis I was visiting my aunt in Ohio for a few months of emotional healing. He seemed relieved to have an excuse not to look at me. The changes will be significant, Dr. Chen said, reviewing my file, but subtle enough to maintain natural features. The goal isn't to create a new person, but to enhance who you could have been. I studied the digital mock-ups on his tablet. The woman in the after images wasn't me, but she wasn't a stranger either. She was who I might have become in another life, one where Travis's mistress hadn't been in that car. How long until I can? I trailed off, unsure how to finish. Return? Revenge? Begin again? 3 months for full recovery. Dr. Chen's eyes were kind. Graham mentioned you're staying at his apartment during the recovery period? I nodded. Graham's Manhattan pied-a-terre had become my sanctuary, filled with his late wife's art collection. He rarely used it anymore, preferring his house in Connecticut. The first surgery was scheduled for tomorrow. Tonight, I sat in Graham's apartment, watching the city lights flicker like stars. My phone buzzed. Travis. How's your aunt? His voice was slightly slurred. Thursday night. Golden Leaf Hotel night. Fine. I touched the surgical consent forms on the coffee table. How's work? Busy. Listen, Mother wants to know when you're coming home. She's worried about appearances. Course she was. I imagined them together at their weekly dinner, discussing how to manage their damaged goods. I need time, I said, the lie coming easily now. To heal. Right. Well, take care of yourself. He hung up before I could respond. My phone buzzed again, a text from Graham. Ready for tomorrow? I started to type yes, but stopped when another message appeared. An unknown number. Are you sure you want to know the truth about that night? My hand shook as I replied. Who is this? Someone who was there. Someone who knows what really happened. Meet me at Riverside Park, midnight. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Could be a trap. Or it could be her, the woman from the hotel. The smart thing would be to ignore it. To proceed with surgery with my carefully laid plans. But something in me needed to know. At 11:45, I took a cab to Riverside Park. The night was cool, the Hudson River a black ribbon under moonlight. A woman sat alone on a bench, her face hidden by a hoodie. Mrs. Blake, she said as I approached. Or should I say, the first Mrs. Blake. She pushed back her hood, revealing a face I recognized from office party photos on Travis's desk. Sarah from accounting. He wasn't supposed to be there that night, she said quietly. At the hotel. He was following me, suspicious. When he saw who I was meeting. His client, I finished, the pieces clicking into place. She laughed bitterly. The client's wife. Travis caught us together. He was drunk, angry. Started making threats about exposing everything. That's when. When what? When he called his friend, the guy who hit your car. Asked him to teach his cheating client's wife a lesson. Follow her car, scare her a little. Sarah's voice cracked. But the guy was high, confused. He followed the wrong car. Yours. The world tilted sideways. Travis. Travis arranged the accident. Not yours. He never meant. She stood up, backing away. I just thought you should know. Before you disappear. I watched her hurry away, my mind spinning. All this time, I'd been planning to become someone new to escape Travis's betrayal. But he wasn't just unfaithful. He was the reason I'd lost everything. My phone buzzed, Graham. Surgery prep starts at 6 a.m. Are you ready? I looked at my reflection in the dark window of a passing car. Tomorrow, I wouldn't just become someone new. I'd become someone Travis would never see coming. Ready, I typed back. But we need to modify the plan. 3 months after my surgery, I stood outside our house in the rain, unrecognizable. My new face, beautiful but different, felt like armor. The divorce papers in my bag felt like weapons. I'd planned this moment carefully. Thursday evening, when Travis would be home from his client meeting at the Golden Leaf. When Irene would be over for their weekly dinner, planning their perfect future without their damaged goods. He still worked. I heard their voices from the dining room as I entered, Travis and Irene discussing me. The lawyers say if she doesn't respond soon, we can proceed with abandonment charges, Irene was saying. Really, Travis, it's for the best. That accident was a blessing in disguise. I stepped into the doorway, watching them freeze mid-conversation. Hello, Travis. He stared at me blankly, then with growing confusion. I'm sorry, who? I'm Claire Foster, I said, using the name Graham and I had chosen. Graham Foster's niece. I'm here about Serafina Blake. Travis's wine glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Irene stood quickly, always ready to manage a crisis. Whatever this is about, we can discuss it privately. Can we? I placed the divorce papers on the table. Like you discussed arranging the accident that scarred your wife's face? Color drained from Travis's face. I don't know what you're talking about. Sarah from accounting does. I pulled out my phone, playing the recording from that night in the park. Travis's voice filled the room. Follow her car. Scare her a little. That's not. I never meant. Travis stumbled over his words. You never meant for it to be me? The words came out calm, controlled. Your pregnant wife instead of your client's cheating spouse? Irene gasped. Pregnant? Oh, he didn't tell you that part? I turned to her. About the grandchild you lost because your perfect son wanted to teach someone a lesson? Sera, Travis whispered, finally seeing past the new face to something familiar in my eyes. I pulled out one more document, a police report naming Travis as an accessory to the accident, with Sarah's sworn statement attached. Sign the divorce papers, I said quietly. Or everyone learns what kind of man you really are. Travis lunged for the police report, but I stepped back. His foot caught the spilled wine and he crashed into the china cabinet. Crystal shattered around him as he fell. Travis! Irene rushed to help him up, but he pushed her away, blood trickling from a cut on his hand. You can't prove anything, he snarled, but his eyes were desperate. Can't I? I moved toward the door. Graham Foster's legal team would disagree. They're very interested in making amends for his son's part in this, especially now that they know who really orchestrated it. Wait, Travis called as I reached the door. Please. I'll sign. Just don't tell anyone. Like you didn't tell anyone about our baby? The words tasted like ashes. Like you didn't tell anyone about planning the accident? I loved you, he said weakly. No. I touched my transformed face. You loved what I looked like. There's a difference. I left the papers on the table and walked out into the rain. Behind me, I heard Irene's shocked sobs, Travis's desperate attempts to explain. My phone buzzed. Graham. Is it done? I couldn't answer. The victory felt hollow, like ashes in my mouth. I'd gotten what I wanted, Travis's signature on divorce papers, his perfect life crumbling around him. But standing in the rain, wearing a stranger's face, I realized revenge hadn't filled the emptiness inside me. I walked to my car, past the spot where Travis used to park, where he'd kiss me goodbye each morning. Past the garden where we'd planned to build a nursery. Past all the dreams that had died the night he chose revenge over love. Another text lit up my phone, an unknown number. You're not the only one he hurt. There are others. We should talk. I sat in my car, rain drumming on the roof, staring at the message. I'd thought exposing Travis would be the end. But maybe it was just the beginning. Question was, how much deeper into darkness was I willing to go? The art gallery buzzed with Manhattan's elite, all here to see the mysterious new artist everyone was talking about. My paintings lined the walls, faces twisted in pain and betrayal, beauty emerging from darkness. All signed with my new name, Claire Foster. I adjusted my dress, still uncomfortable in my new skin, when I saw him. Travis, standing before my centerpiece, a woman's face split between light and shadow, a wine glass reflecting flames. Remarkable work, a voice beside me said. I turned to find a man with kind eyes and paint-stained hands. I'm Eli Turner, the gallery owner. Claire, I replied, watching Travis from the corner of my eye. He was reading the painting's title, Thursday Nights at the Golden Leaf. Your pieces speak to transformation, Eli said. Pain becoming power. Very personal. Before I could respond, Travis's voice cut through the crowd. Where did you get your inspiration? He was staring at me now, recognition flickering in his eyes. 3 months since I'd left him with those divorce papers, and he'd lost weight. Perfect suit hung loose on his frame. Life experience, I said, meeting his gaze. Some people wear masks. I paint them. Sera. He whispered my real name like a prayer or a curse. Eli looked between us, sensing the tension. You know each other? No, I said firmly. Not anymore. Travis grabbed my arm. We need to talk. Let go. My voice carried across the gallery, heads turning. Everything you took from me, my reputation, my mother's respect, my position at the firm. His fingers dug into my flesh. Was revenge worth it? Was Thursday night at the Golden Leaf worth it? I pulled free. Was trying to hurt your client's wife worth what happened to me? To our baby. Eli stepped forward, protective, but I held up my hand. You want to know about inspiration, Travis? Look around. Every painting here tells a story about masks and lies, about men who destroy what they claim to love. I never meant to hit my car? No, you meant to hit someone else's. That makes it better. The gallery had gone silent, watching our drama unfold. In the corner, I spotted Graham Foster, who'd helped orchestrate this moment. Beside him stood Sarah from accounting, her face pale but determined. You're not the only one with stories to tell, I continued. Sarah's here. So are 3 other women from the office, all with similar tales about Thursday nights and threats and accidents. Travis's face went ashen. You can't prove. Actually, Graham stepped forward, we can. My son may have been driving drunk that night, but the police are very interested in who put him up to it. And why? You set this up, Travis realized, looking at the crowd of witnesses. The gallery, the paintings, all of it. No, Travis. You set this up. Years ago, when you decided other people's lives were yours to destroy. He lunged for the painting, but Eli was faster, stepping between us. Travis's fist connected with Eli's jaw instead of the canvas. Security appeared instantly, restraining Travis as he shouted about lies and betrayal. As they led him away, Irene emerged from the crowd, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. I never knew, she whispered, about any of it. The women, the accidents, the baby. Would it have mattered? She flinched at my tone, finally seeing herself in my paintings, the enabler, the keeper of masks. I'm sorry, she said, but I was already turning away. Eli touched his bruised jaw, managing a smile. Hell of an opening night. I should explain. You don't owe me explanations. He gestured to the paintings. Your art already tells the truth. The real question is, what story do you want to tell next? I looked around the gallery, at my pain transformed into beauty, at the women Travis had hurt now standing tall, at Graham's proud smile, at Eli's understanding eyes. Something new, I said finally. Something that isn't about masks or revenge. I'd like to hear that story, Eli said softly. For the first time since the accident, I felt truly seen, not for my old face or my new one, but for who I was beneath both masks. So would I replied, ready to begin again. 1 year later, I stood in my studio apartment, surrounded by half-packed boxes and new paintings. These weren't about masks or revenge anymore. They showed healing, growth, moments of unexpected joy caught in color and light. A letter from Graham sat on my desk, delivered this morning. I'd been afraid to open it, but now seemed like the time. Dear Sarah, or Claire, you'll always be both to me now. My son came home yesterday. 6 months sober. He asked about you, about the accident. I told him everything, about Travis's manipulation, about your transformation, about how your strength helped me find the courage to reconnect with him. He wants to apologize in person, but I told him that's your choice to make. Some scars need time to heal. Others teach us who we really are. Thank you for showing me that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about painting a better future. Graham. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Eli stood there, paint-stained hands holding coffee and bagels. Ready for moving day? Almost. I gestured at the chaos. Just reading a letter from Graham. Good news. Different news. I touched my face, no longer the one I was born with, not quite the one Travis had destroyed, but entirely my own. His son wants to meet. Eli set down breakfast, giving me space to process. That's what I loved about him. He understood the power of silence. The gallery called, he said finally. They want to know if you're ready to show your new series. I looked at my latest paintings. No more darkness, no more hidden meanings. Just light breaking through clouds, hands reaching toward each other, faces emerging from shadows into dawn. I think I am. I picked up my favorite piece, a self-portrait showing all 3 versions of me, not as masks but as chapters in a longer story. But under my real name this time. Which one? Both. Serafina Claire Blake. No more hiding. He smiled, understanding what this meant. And the meeting with Graham's son? Maybe. I folded Graham's letter carefully. Some stories need proper endings. My phone buzzed, a news alert about Travis. He'd pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges, along with several counts of harassment. The other women had come forward, each with their own stories of Thursday nights and threats and accidents. Irene had testified against him. You know, Eli said, reading over my shoulder, your first show helped those women find their voice. They helped me find mine too. I closed the article. I thought revenge would heal me, but it was telling the truth that finally did it. We spent the morning packing, wrapping each painting carefully. Eli handled them like precious things, not because of their value, but because they were pieces of my journey. Near sunset, we carried the last box to his truck. My new apartment was above his gallery, a place for both art and living, he'd said. A place to begin again. Oh, he reached into his pocket. This came to the gallery yesterday. It was a small package from Irene. Inside, I found my old wedding ring and a note. I kept this when Travis threw it away. It belonged to his grandmother, but it should have been yours. Sell it, keep it, whatever brings you peace. I'm learning that's what matters most. Irene. I held the ring up to the fading light. Once it had represented everything I wanted. Now it was just a circle of metal, heavy with history but powerless to hurt me. What will you do with it? Eli asked. I smiled, an idea forming. I think I just found the centerpiece for my new show. Something about transforming old pain into new beauty. He took my hand, the one that used to wear that ring, and kissed it softly. Ready to go home? Home. Not a place to hide or seek revenge. Not a mask to wear or a role to play. Just a space to be wholly, completely myself, scars, changes, strength, and all. Yes, I said, leaving the past behind one final time. I'm ready.